Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the case of Serhiy Tkach, a Ukrainian serial killer. And yeah, this one's a listener suggestion. Someone sent in his Wikipedia article, and just from skimming it, it's pretty
Yeah,
intense.
it's one of those cases that really gets under your skin.
For sure. Like, it's not just the brutality of his crimes, which is obviously horrific, but it's also how it kind of makes you question everything you thought you knew about police work and investigations.
Absolutely. It really exposes the flaws in our systems.
Right. So, okay, for starters, Tkach was active for a really long time. We're talking from 1980 to 2005. Like over 2 decades, he was preying on young women and girls. The Wikipedia article says they were between 8 and 18 years old.
Yeah, a really vulnerable population.
Yeah.
And the sheer number of victims is just staggering.
Officially, he's linked to 37 deaths, but the article mentions that he actually claimed to have killed over 100. It's hard to even wrap your head around that.
It is. And what makes it even more disturbing is that Tkach wasn't some random outsider. He was a former Soviet soldier, and get this, a police investigator.
Oh, wow. So he was using his knowledge of law enforcement to basically stay one step ahead.
Exactly. He knew how the system worked, how to cover his tracks. It's like something out of a nightmare.
Totally. Did the article say anything about specific ways he used his background to evade capture?
Yeah, actually. It mentions that he chose his victims very carefully, often targeting areas near railways that have been treated with tar.
Why tar?
Well, because he knew that it would throw off police dogs, make it much harder to track him.
Wow. That's chilling. Like he was really thinking things through.
He was, and it's that kind of premeditation that makes this case so terrifying. This wasn't just random acts of violence. This was planned, calculated.
And heartbreaking. The article mentions that his primary method was strangulation and that he often sexually violated the bodies afterwards. It's hard to even imagine the terror his victims must have felt.
It's a truly horrific pattern of violence,
Mm.
and it unfortunately played a role in how this case unfolded. Well, because of the brutality and the high-profile nature of these crimes, there was immense pressure to find the perpetrator. And that pressure led to some serious missteps.
This is where the story gets really crazy, right? Because 15 innocent men ended up being imprisoned for Trickett's crimes.
It's a shocking miscarriage of justice, and a stark reminder of how flawed our systems can be. One of those men even committed suicide, unable to cope with the weight of the false accusation.
God, that's just devastating.
It is, and it forces us to ask some hard questions about what went wrong. Was it a rush to judgment? Were there limitations in forensic science back then?
Well, yeah, like even reading the Wikipedia article, it kind of felt like they were grasping at straws. Was there anything specific about what led to these wrongful convictions?
The article doesn't go into detail about each individual case, but it does mention that many of the convictions relied heavily on eyewitness testimony.
Right, and we know now that eyewitness testimony can be notoriously unreliable.
Exactly. And back then, DNA testing wasn't as advanced as it is today, so it was much harder to definitively prove someone's innocence.
So you have this perfect storm of pressure to find the killer limitations in forensic technology and reliance on potentially faulty eyewitness accounts. It's a recipe for disaster.
It is. And unfortunately, in this case, it led to the suffering of innocent people, which makes Tkach's eventual capture even more unbelievable.
Okay, so he was finally caught in 2005. How did they finally get him?
Well, according to the article, he is attending the funeral of one of his victims.
Wait, what, he was at the funeral? Like the funeral of someone he murdered?
Apparently so. And some children who had seen him on the day of the murder recognized him and told the authorities.
That is wild. Was it like some kind of twisted compulsion? Or was he just incredibly arrogant?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of both. But whatever the reason, it finally led to his arrest after 25 years of terror.
So they finally get this guy. He's sentenced to life in prison. You'd think that would be the end of it.
You would think. But then we get this bizarre twist. A Netflix documentary revealed that Tkach actually got married while in prison.
Hold on. He got married from prison.
Yep, to a woman in her 20s who fell for him after reading a media interview.
Seriously. I mean, this is a man who murdered dozens of young women, and someone decided to marry him. What does that even say about people?
Well, it definitely raises some questions about the psychology of attraction. Why are some people drawn to individuals who have committed such horrific acts? It's a fascinating and disturbing phenomenon.
No kidding. We're going to need a whole other deep dive to unpack that one. Okay, so we've got a former police officer turned serial killer, a justice system that failed multiple innocent people, and now this marriage situation. Where do we even go from here?
Well, I think it's time to unpack some of these individual elements a little further, starting with Tkach's modus operandi. The article touches on it, but there's a lot more to uncover. Maybe by understanding how he operated, we can start to understand how he got away with it for so long.
Right. And maybe, just maybe, by digging deeper into those details, we can shed some light on how to prevent these kinds of systemic failures in the future. Because one thing's for sure, this case is far from over.
It's easy to get caught up in the shocking details of this case, but it's important to remember the victims. 37 confirmed deaths. Their stories deserve to be heard, even if we can't, uncover every detail from the Wikipedia entry.
Right. And we can't forget about the families of those who were wrongly convicted. I mean, can you imagine the years of anguish knowing that your loved one was in prison for something they didn't do?
It's just a ripple effect of trauma. And it really highlights the need for, constant vigilance and careful consideration within our justice systems.
Yeah, like especially in cases like this, we have to be incredibly careful about relying too heavily on eyewitness testimony or circumstantial evidence. That's what makes this whole thing so perplexing, right? You've got the brutality, the sheer number of victims, but then on the other hand, you have these baffling mistakes in the investigation. It's like a cautionary tale or something.
It is. It really forces us to confront the limitations of even the most well-intentioned systems. I mean, forensic science wasn't as advanced back then.
Yeah.
But even with all the technology we have today, human error and bias can still creep in.
So it's not just about better tech, it's about better processes, too.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of scrutiny and questioning within our justice systems. Being willing to challenge assumptions, re-examine evidence, and be open to the possibility of being wrong.
It's almost like we need a healthy skepticism, not just of the evidence itself, but of the sisters and the people involved.
Precisely. Everyone involved, from the investigators to the prosecutors to the judges, needs to be committed to seeking the truth, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient.
And maybe this is a long shot, but do you think public awareness plays a role here too? Like the more people understand, the potential pitfalls of criminal investigations and the importance of due process, the better equipped we are as a society to hold our systems accountable.
I think you're absolutely right. Informed citizens are crucial to a well-functioning justice system. It's about, engaging in these conversations, questioning the narratives that are presented to us, and demanding transparency and accountability from those in positions of power.
So, in a way, this deep dive is about more than just Serhiy Tkach. It's about recognizing that justice is a process. And that process requires constant vigilance and a commitment to truth and fairness from everyone involved.
Well said. And even then, as this case so tragically demonstrates, there will be times when the system fails. But by acknowledging those failures, learning from them, and striving to do better, we can hopefully prevent future tragedies.
Speaking of striving to do better, let's shift gears a bit and go back to Tkach's modus operandi. We touched on it briefly earlier, but the article mentions some specifics about, how he selected his victims and carried out his crimes. It feels like understanding those details might offer some insight into how he evaded capture for so long.
You're right. The devil is in the details, as they say. And in Tkach's case, those details are both disturbing and revealing. For instance, the article mentions that he often approached his victims under the guise of offering help or asking for directions, using deception to gain their trust.
So he wasn't just relying on brute force, he was using manipulation, preying on people's willingness to help. That's especially insidious, considering that he often targeted young girls.
Exactly. And that feeds into the pattern of him choosing locations near railways treated with tar. He knew this would hinder tracking efforts, make it more difficult for authorities to connect the crimes and, build a profile. He was basically exploiting blind spots in the investigative process.
It's almost like he was playing some kind of twisted game of chess, always thinking a few steps ahead. And his background in law enforcement obviously gave him a significant advantage.
It certainly did. He understood the procedures, the limitations, the potential biases of the investigators.
I'm guessing that knowledge also helped him manipulate crime scenes. The article mentions that he would often stage the bodies in specific ways to mislead the police, almost like he was trying to create a false narrative.
Yes, and that's a classic tactic used by many organized criminals, especially those with law enforcement backgrounds. By manipulating the evidence, they can control the narrative, cast doubt on the investigation. It's a way of turning the system against itself.
That's messed up. It's brilliant in a twisted way, but also incredibly disturbing.
It is. And it speaks to a level of cunning and premeditation that makes this case even more unsettling. He wasn't just reacting in the moment. He was actively strategizing and controlling the narrative from the very beginning.
Okay, so we're starting to understand how he operated, how he managed to evade capture for so long. But what about the psychology behind all of this?
Well, that's where things get even more complex. And unfortunately, the Wikipedia article doesn't offer much in terms of a psychological profile, but I think it's worth exploring. Because to truly understand someone like Serhiy Tkach, we need to delve into the darkness that drove him.
All right, let's do it. Let's get into the mind of a monster. It's just crazy to think that someone like Tkach, with, his meticulous planning and manipulation, could exist in a world where we have DNA analysis and all this advanced forensic tech. It makes me wonder, are we really any safer?
Yeah, that's a question that hangs over this entire case. We have these incredible tools, but the human element, as we've been discussing, remains a wild card.
And speaking of the human element, we can't ignore the fact that Tkach actually managed to find a wife while serving a life sentence for these horrific crimes. I mean, after everything we've learned about him, it's just a mind-blowing detail.
It is. And it really speaks to the complexities of human psychology, the dark side of attraction.
The Wikipedia article mentioned a Netflix documentary that kind of delves into this. Do you remember any specifics about what they found?
Yeah. The documentary explored that aspect in some detail. It turns out that Tkach received a lot of letters from women after his crimes became public. Some were drawn to his notoriety. Others seemed to believe they could somehow change him.
That's both fascinating and disturbing. Like, they were completely overlooking the nature of his crimes.
It's a phenomenon that criminologists have observed in other cases involving notorious criminals. Infamy seems to hold a strange allure for some.
Is there like a psychological explanation for this? What could possibly draw someone to a person like Tkach?
There are a few theories. Some psychologists believe it's a form of hybristophilia. It's a paraphilia where individuals are sexually aroused by someone who has committed acts of violence or cruelty.
Okay, that's getting pretty dark.
It is. But there are also theories about a savior complex, where individuals believe they can change or redeem someone who is perceived as bad or broken.
So, like a combination of morbid fascination and a misguided sense of heroism.
Possibly. The documentary also explored the idea that some individuals might be drawn to the power dynamic, feeling a sense of control or dominance by being associated with someone who has committed horrific acts.
Wow. This is heavy stuff. But I think it's important to talk about. It's a reminder that even within the darkest corners of humanity, there can be these strange, twisted connections.
It is. And it underscores the importance of not just understanding the crimes themselves, but also the psychological and societal factors that contribute to them.
Well, this depth dive has definitely taken us on a journey. We've explored the dark world of a serial killer, uncovered the failings of a justice system, and grappled with some pretty unsettling questions about the nature of evil and attraction. It's a lot to process.
It is. But I think it's important to engage with these uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
Because by understanding the darkness, we can better appreciate the light and hopefully work towards preventing such horrors from happening again.
So as we wrap up our exploration of Serhiy Tkach, I'm left with this lingering question. Could something like this happen again in our modern age with all the advances in forensic technology? Or are Tkach's crimes a relic of a bygone era?
That's a question I'd like to leave with you, our listener. Has our technology outpaced our capacity for error, or are we still vulnerable to the same biases and failings that allowed Tkach to operate for so long? Something to think about.
It is, and it's a reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing process, one that requires constant vigilance, critical thinking, and a commitment to truth. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, but be careful out there.